today. I'm Kyler Cheatham here with Eric Kimberling, and we are doing a special live stream today to celebrate Eric's 50,000 plus now subscribers on his YouTube channel. And this has really been a passion project for Eric, and I wanted to jump on and offer a live Q&A for our great audience to ask him questions and kind of get to know his content a little bit better, and then talk about kind of the trends and future of digital transformation. So, with that, thank you so much for joining me, Eric, and congratulations on the 50,000 subscribers.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. So, can you talk a little bit about your mission with your YouTube channel and why you felt as though it was so important to put all of this free premium content out to your audience?
Yeah, it was sort of an accident. I would love to say it was some brilliant strategy or plan that I had all along, but it was not at all that. It was a situation that when I left Panorama to start Third Stage, I had to figure out a way to market the company differently than I had done at Panorama, because it took me 12 or 13 years to build up the blog and the SEO engine that we had built at Panorama. And that's what I did at Panorama. I wrote a lot of blogs and got traction through SEO. So when I started Third Stage, I knew I couldn't replicate all that I had done in 10 years quickly. So I was trying to think of other ways to get the message out about Third Stage and what we stood for, and at that time, what the new company was all about. So I had put a couple of videos up, just sort of intermittently, just to get, some FaceTime with potential clients and whatnot. And then over time, I noticed that some of those videos started to get traction and go viral. And so I thought maybe I should do more videos. And so I started doing more. And then finally, the ones I was putting out that I was just crudely producing on my laptop or my phone or whatever were starting to go viral too. So I said, well, what if we just start professionally editing them and stepping it up a notch? So that was about 4 years ago. I guess it was almost 4 years ago that I decided to do two videos a week. And then, then we started doing the podcast and the live streams and all that stuff on top of it. So we just keep doubling down on the video thing as we see it work more and more. So that's really, it wasn't any grand master plan. It was more of an accident and reacting to what I was seeing in the market and with the channel.
Absolutely. And I'd love to hear from our audience. Do you subscribe to Eric's channel, or is there a favorite video that you've watched of his? And you can pop all of that in the chat. We can actually see it live. If you do have questions for him, you can also pop that in the chat as well. And I can bring them up and ask questions in real time. So, Eric, why do you feel like it's so important to kind of be the disruptor voice within kind of the digital transformation or software industry? Because some of the content you put out can be controversial in the fact that it's not kind of on message with the bigger software companies or system integrators.
Yeah, and I think that's that dynamic you're describing is especially true in today's society. It's sort of a cancel culture and that sort of thing, where you have to toe the company line, or you have to stick with the mainstream narrative, or else you're ostracized in some way. So it does make it in some ways even more jarring, some of the stuff we say and some of the philosophies we have. But it's really, in my opinion, it's really just saying the truth. We're saying what everyone knows and thinks. They just don't say it out loud. And so that's really what I try to do, is just say the things that we all kind of know to be true, but no one really wants to say, primarily because, software vendors have their machine and their ecosystems that they've built to have finely tuned marketing messages and finely crafted, well-controlled narratives. And it extends beyond software vendors. It goes to the system integrators. It goes to the industry analysts, who are all paid by the software vendors to perpetuate that same message. So you get this sort of echo chamber that the industry has built that talks about how great everything is, how great technology is, and how everyone should be going through a digital transformation right now, or else they're going to fail. Everyone should move to the cloud right now, or else they're going to fail. It's just sort of like you get. I think the industry gets tired of that biased messaging, and then we come along and say something like, "Well, hold on a minute. You don't have to move to the cloud if you don't want to, or you don't have to upgrade your technologies. You have options. You have, there's pros and cons to any approach you take." And so it's really just coming out and stating the truth, which is really weird that that's so disruptive and so crazy and so far out there in the industry. But we're just saying it like it is, and what we see on the front lines with clients and We don't sell software, so we have no dog in the fights, and we have no skin in the game in terms of wanting to necessarily disrupt or go against the vendor narrative. It's just, we just tend to call out the pros and the cons of different scenarios and situations.
Yeah, it's always so interesting that having the intention of your client goals is so against the norm. So it's I think that's why your audience feels like that's so refreshing, is because you are an advocate for them, and that is your only agenda.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me, in some ways, it kind of reminds me a little bit of the years ago when the financial services industry went through some changes where they had to separate the industry analysts from the firms that were actually selling stocks and things like that, because you had the industry analysts that were peddling
Mhm.
their own products, and so the regulatory pressures caused that to stop. I don't know that we'll ever get there anytime soon in this industry, but it's sort of, to me, the same sort of thing. You have sort of a rigged system right now. And so what I love about it is we can come along and not being tethered by any sort of vendor relationship or formal vendor relationship, not having any financial ties to the software vendors really gives us the flexibility to be able to state the truth. Whereas most consultants, most system integrators, most software vendors can't really do what we do because it
Mhm.
goes against their own self-interest. So anyway, so that's really an interesting point as well.
Absolutely. Well, definitely the fundamentals of your channel, but I want to get to your audience questions because I think that's a huge reason in why your channel has grown so quickly, is because you truly do respond and acknowledge comments, not only in real time on live streams like this, but in your additional podcasts, which you have two of. So you have Ground Control, and then your shorter form podcast, which is Digital Stratosphere, that drops every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Also, the videos on Eric's channel and Third Stage channel, we respond to all of those comments, and Eric does personally on his social media. So if you haven't seen our question jar, this is a jar that I utilize in our Ground Control Transformation Ground Control podcast, which you can find anywhere you get your podcast, or any channel you're listening on now. But I take the user questions or audience questions and I put them in here. So I'm going to ask Eric some of these questions that I pulled already, but if you have questions for him right now, go ahead and pop them in the chat wherever you're viewing, and I'll bring them up on the screen, and we can kind of get to our audience questions, since this is kind of a celebration for them too.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, good. Here we go. This is a comment. Sometimes I pull comments mostly for my own entertainment, but so Eric can respond to them, especially if they're funny. So this one is from your review of Oracle NetSuite on TikTok that you put up. So if you don't follow Eric on TikTok, his shorter form videos, you can follow him there too. But this user said Oracle is the new Blockbuster slash Circuit City of this industry. So I wonder what your response would be to that, because this user's got jokes. So
That's funny. It's funny how Blockbuster and Circuit City both have such negative connotations. And if you're not familiar with either
Mhm.
company, they're both U.S. or they were both U.S. based companies that were highly successful at one point. Now they're largely obsolete and irrelevant. So I think that's what the user is suggesting, or that what the audience member is suggesting will happen to Oracle. Yeah, I don't know. I maybe they end up becoming obsolete, but right now where we are and the current time and place, I think NetSuite in particular, I think is in an actually a pretty good spot, because they're a native SaaS solution, whereas a lot of software vendors are still trying to get to the cloud, and they're trying to catch up in the cloud and SaaS arms race. Whereas Oracle or NetSuite has always been in the cloud, so they
Mhm.
aren't playing the same catch up game. They've got a more mature cloud solution than most, if not all the other software vendors. The other thing that I think NetSuite has going for it is, ever since Oracle bought the company many years ago, they've been a lot more aggressive going after the kind of the mid market as well. So they're
Mhm.
kind of moving upstream, and we're seeing NetSuite now more relevant in larger organizations. Maybe not Fortune 500 or large multinational global organizations as much, but we are seeing it more in the mid market, even upper mid market. So I think right now it's absolutely relevant. Maybe someday we'll look back and say, yep, NetSuite became the blockbuster of the 2020s. But right now, I don't see that happening. It could. I mean,
Mhm.
I've been around long enough to know that these vendors come and go, and that systems come and go. When I first started, for example, Bond was still a really big deal, and
Mhm.
SAP was sort of the disruptor and the threat to Bond. And now no one ever really talks about Bond unless they're trying to replace the system. And SAP, of course, is the more prominent one of those two. So I've been around long enough to know that this stuff all changes, and what is relevant today and what's hot today in technology 5 or 10 years from now will be totally obsolete. And we'll look back at this video and say that was totally off base for the long term. So, which is okay.
Very interesting. Yeah, definitely an evolution within the industry, and sometimes a little cyclical. But I want to bring up this comment here from a user on LinkedIn. Sometimes we can see your name, sometimes we can't. So this is just talking about my first exposure to third stage was when my team was selecting an ERP system for my last employer. Your video on negotiating with ERP vendors was such a help. And of course, congratulations on the 50K. So lots of congratulation messaging coming in. But the ERP vendor negotiations is something you focus on a lot. And why do you think it's important to kind of lift the veil on talking about what it means to actually go through a vendor negotiation?
Well, I think that topic, as well as a lot of the topics I cover on my YouTube channel, are things that are meant to be, they're meant to be helpful and meant to help outline the full scope and the full picture of what you're going through in a digital transformation. So in other words, I'm not trying to be mean when I talk about how to beat up a vendor in the negotiation process. I'm not trying to be mean when I say software product A is not perfect. Here are the strengths, but here are the weaknesses you need to be aware of. I'm not doing that stuff to poke holes or to poke at the bear, so to speak, even though sometimes I think people feel like I am. I'm
Yeah,
really not. I'm just stating facts again, and
right.
stating an objective, unbiased view of the market. And that's the same thing I'm doing in those negotiation videos, is just stating, here's how vendors make money.
Mhm,
Here's what they want, and here's what you want and need. And, here's some strategies on how to reconcile that and sort of meet in the middle. And again, back to your point, what you said earlier, Kyler, about really coming at it from a client perspective
mhm,
and giving clients the ammunition and the knowledge to be able to be on a level playing field with the software vendors and the big system integrators is really important to me. And I think that's an important dynamic that's been missing in the industry, is that the software vendors and the SIs have too much power. I mean, they have too much
mhm,
influence. They have too much control. You see it right now. On a side note, you see it right now with the whole cloud migration and the sunsetting of legacy on-premise systems. I get that we're heading to the cloud. That's where we're going. But the fact that software vendors are coming out and basically twisting the arms of their
mhm,
own clients to say, you need to get off this system because we're going to stop supporting it. And by the way, you need to move to the cloud because we make more money when you move to the cloud.
mhm,
Um, that to me is a problem. And so my whole part of the purpose or the vision or the mission of the channel, even though I didn't have this purpose or mission early on and it wasn't planned, but as the channel started to get traction, I really felt like there's a voice that we could have
mhm.
to help clients level that playing field and not be so at a disadvantage with the vendors, with the big software vendors and the big system integrators and that sort of thing. So that's really the whole idea, is to, really paint the whole picture in negotiations or whatever the topic of the video might be.
Absolutely. And if you haven't seen Eric's negotiation videos, you can go ahead and head over to his YouTube channel if you're not on it already. He does have a variety of assets because the if you miss on the negotiation process, then you are trapped right into this agreement that might cost you a lot of resources, financial resources, and just internal resources within your digital transformation. And a main reason that you might have to engage someone like Eric in an expert witness. Hopefully, litigation is always the last option, right? But that's why we and Eric put out so much on that, so that you really are armed to have that conversation.
Yeah.
So
Well
I
said.
want I want to bring up this question from Anastasia on YouTube. I work as a change manager of SaaS transformations. With all the different changes, it's hard to focus. What hard skills would you recommend to learn slash have to stay a valuable asset? That's a really interesting question.
Yeah,
Usually
it
we
is,
see
especially.
opposite. you know?
Yeah. Yeah, especially if you're a change manager. I think that's the right kind of question to ask if you're managing change. Having something more than the softer side of change, having something more tangible and more hard or concrete skill set is going to be important. So I'll just tell you what I look for when I'm hiring people or when we're hiring people on our team. Obviously, cultural fit's a huge thing. So that for us as a company, we gauge largely on cultural fit. But in terms of the skills we look for, when we have change consultants or candidates for change consultants that are interested in joining the team, I'll look for things like not just the ProSci certifications or the change management experience, but
Mhm.
I'll also look for those that have some sort of operational experience. So if they've got a Lean Six Sigma background or process reengineering background, that hard skill is
Mhm.
really powerful when you combine it with the change management knowledge. I think that's a powerful combination. Same with if if you can get some sort of certification or deeper knowledge of a certain technology.
Mhm.
When I started my career, again, this was not part of my master plan. In fact, I resisted this, but I'm glad it didn't work out the way I wanted to at the time. But when I started at Price Waterhouse, I knew I wanted to be a change management consultant. But one of the first things they did is my partner that I work for sent me to get certified in SAP. It was R3 at the time, SAP R3. And I said, why would I get certified in SAP when I'm going to be a change management consultant? And it just, long story short, she just said, trust me, you just need to. And I did. And I'm glad I did. So I ended up doing change management for SAP implementations, but I could do it better because I knew how the technology
Mhm.
worked. And I wasn't like an expert. I wasn't configuring or coding or anything like that, but I knew enough about it to really understand how the software would change a client's business. So I think having any sort of tangible skill set like that, whether it's technical knowledge for whatever technology you might be deploying or operational knowledge, those are two areas in particular that I think are pretty powerful combinations, especially when you combine it with change management.
Absolutely, and that's a great question. So kudos to you, Anastasia, for wanting to branch out, because that piece of consulting, and on the other flip side, if you are a very technical consultant, having those more softer skills like change management is makes you more holistic and valuable to the overall transformation. So for sure.
Yeah.
All right, back to the jar.
All right.
Shake it up. All right, so this is kind of a specific question, but an interesting one. What are some good options for real estate or property management systems when it comes to going through a digital transformation?
Ooh. I'm busted on this one. I don't have a lot of experience in
Yeah.
that vertical. B, I'm drawing a total blank on systems that are good for that space, partly because I don't have much experience in it.
Yeah.
So,
So this is what
um,
I'll say to save you in this situation. We do actually work with a variety of property management companies. So whoever
yeah,
wrote this question, I'm going to go talk to our system experts because we do have those here at Third Stage, and then I'm going to respond to you of what they say so that we know we don't take a ton of time since we only have 10 minutes left with Eric. Sound like a good
sounds
plan?
good. Yeah, yeah. Fortunately, our company is much larger than me. We have 70 other people that are much smarter than me. So
Me
that
too.
collective knowledge is gonna
I'm just the talent, Eric. That's what
right,
we are.
right, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, we're just the faces of the company. We don't actually, you and I don't know as much, right?
Yeah. Okay, this is an interesting question again, and it talks about higher education. Why is digital transformation so difficult in higher education, and how can you get through a very political type of organization?
Well, I think that nails it on the head. The last part of that question. That's what I was going to say when you first asked it was the political nature of schools and also the
Mhm.
unions and tenure. Anytime you have that sort of backdrop for any sort of organization, not just higher education, but it could also be government. It could also be, a semi-regulated environment or just an old school sort of industry where you've got a lot of tenure, a lot of unions, a lot of politics. Anytime you have those dynamics, it just creates a backdrop of
Mhm.
difficulty going through change because those right there are going to be barriers and potential headwinds to the change, not because people are intentionally trying to sabotage a transformation necessarily, but because by nature, those organizations are harder to change and slower to change in general. And when you go through digital transformation, you're speeding things up. You're speeding up the change, and that's running counter to what the organizational culture typically is.
Absolutely. And I'm actually going to cherry pick the next question because it's along these lines. So, this is from your stakeholder management video on TikTok. And this person, along those lines, how can managers drive a digital transformation without a digital transformation culture. So very much on that middle management, lots of politics. How can you create change if you might not be that in that executive position?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because a lot of times, a lot of our client organizations, they're trying to manage up the
Mhm,
organization. They're trying to manage up, and the change management issues oftentimes are coming from the top, and that's really difficult. I mean, in a perfect world, of course, you would say, well, let's make sure the leadership is all on board and the leadership's aligned and all that good stuff. And the reality is that's not always the case. And so what we do is we'll typically start off by engaging the
mhm,
leadership and getting alignment and getting clarity on their vision and making sure they're on the same page with where they want to go as an organization. And a lot of times you can do that in a Trojan horse kind of way, not to say, "Hey, you guys are misaligned, so we need to have an alignment
mhm.
workshop with you guys," because that's threatening, right? And
Yeah.
that usually isn't well received. But if you go at it from the perspective of if I'm a lower level person and I recognize there's a lack of alignment or I need to get more alignment or engagement from higher up, then I might go at it from the angle of, well, this is a first step in a digital transformation is to translate your vision for the company and your
Mhm,
strategy into a digital transformation strategy. And so therefore we need to pick your brains to be able to get that information to be able to do our jobs. And usually that's, better received. And you're also kind of speaking the language of executives too. So that's one way we've seen work pretty well to work up the organization. And then, of course, working down the organization, engaging middle managers and key influencers and stakeholders within the organization. There's a whole strategy and process to go through to get that done.
mhm. Yeah, and, one thing I'll add, just talking to your YouTube channel and that overall, authenticity of your videos, many times what we've seen in very highly political or struggling with executive alignment is Eric will actually come talk and do an executive workshop with their team, and showing them his YouTube channel and being able to say, "Hey, there we have thought leaders, we have industry experts," can really kind of help get that alignment. So if you are struggling with that, feel free to reach out to us and we can really put together some sort of unique package to ensure that we're helping with that because it's a big part of what we do here at Third Stage.
Yeah,
Um,
and I love doing that. By the way, that's one of my favorite parts of my job is being able to do exactly that
yeah,
with executive teams.
yeah, and it's so helpful to the project team as well because you're able to really sit down and not only have this business thought leadership, which is what Eric really speaks on, is business transformations. It's the technology is the spine of the organization, of course, but we're all going through some sort of big change as a business. So it's a great asset to have. And I'm going to bring up this. I don't know if this is like, a placed comment here, or we might already know the answer to this, but I think it's really important to talk about your YouTube content because you do a ton of software evaluations, independent and completely technology agnostic. You don't get paid for those. Nobody gets paid for those in any way, shape, or form. So I kind of want you to talk a little bit about this. So this question is, what is the ERP D365 ranking in 2023? So you can answer that question, but also tell us how you do your rankings and how you kind of come to giving that really unbiased opinion around software systems.
Yeah. So, well, first I'd say the QR code that you see on the screen here, you can use that to download our 2023 digital transformation report, and that has the complete rankings in there, not just for overall rankings for ERP, but top 10 by different industry verticals and different types of systems like warehouse management or HR and that sort of thing. So you can get the full rankings there. But if I remember correctly, I believe Microsoft Dynamics was number one
Mhm,
in our most recent ranking.
mhm,
Prior to that, NetSuite was number one, and then they sort of flipped positions in the more recent one. And the way we do those rankings is part art, part science. I mean, it's largely based on our observations and knowledge of having worked with all these
mhm,
different systems. And while it's on one hand, it's very difficult to generalize enough to do a top 10 ranking. We do it in a way that looks at cross industry, cross geography, independent of industry vertical and company size. What are the most commonly selected and the most successful implementations we see? And Microsoft Dynamics is high up there or on the top of the list, largely because of the flexibility of the product,
mhm,
the fact that there's so many Microsoft shops out there that adapt a little bit easier to Microsoft Dynamics. The fact that they can integrate, it's open integration or open architecture to integrate better with third party systems. So those are a few of the reasons why it rated so high. But to your point, we're not affiliated with Microsoft. And there's a lot of times where we go into client situations and say, Microsoft's not a good fit for you.
Mhm.
So, despite the fact that it's number one on our list, it's oftentimes not even on the short list for our clients because, specific industry verticals or specific needs don't match up with what the Dynamics needs are. So, that's a little bit of background there. But again, if you scan that QR code, that'll give you the full rankings there.
Yes, absolutely. And if you want a specific system, you can search Eric's YouTube channel. You can search our website. We have all of those. And they're also updated. So if you see an older one from 2020, they're always updated in the blogs or whatever asset you're utilizing that for. So, all right, last question. And then I have to bring this up because I don't know what this means. So you have to help me. Is the question jar ISO certified? And I tried to like Google that real quick to be like, what does that mean? So I don't know, William. You'll
I assure you that it's not ISO certified. I think it's being funny there, but I can't remember what ISO stands for, but that's like a manufacturing quality thing.
There
That
you go. We need to brand the question jar, and we also need to get you like an "it depends" sign so you can just like fade that in all
yes,
these types of things. So
yeah, make that part of an ongoing drinking game for the audience too,
I
because
know,
I say it so often.
I know. Um, what would be the best thing for an inspiring integration consultant to focus on? And maybe I'll just morph this onto the movement in the industry around focusing on integrations and the need for kind of that specialized talent around that connectivity in your organization.
Yeah, I think. I mean, certainly you can hone in and focus on a certain technology or a certain software vendor like SAP or Oracle or Microsoft or whatever. That's one path. Um, and these aren't all mutually exclusive. You can combine paths too, but that's
Mhm.
one path you could go down. Another path is that I think is going to be in particularly high demand is going to be anything to do with architecture, system architecture, and being able to design technologically how systems are going to fit together and how data is going to flow and whatnot. And then anything to do with data science, business intelligence, analytics. I mean, that's such a hot area right now. If I were coming out of college or just starting my career, that probably be an area I'd be super interested in is just diving into data science and all that good stuff. So those are a few things, and again, you can mix and match those paths. It's not like you have to pick one of them, but those might be some areas to add some ways to add some specialization, but also add some breadth to your repertoire and your skill set as well.
Yeah, and if you missed Eric's conversation with our chief strategy officer here at Third Stage, Greg Benton, they talk a lot about interoperability. When Greg joined the team, which has been such a fabulous asset, he brought that interoperability concept, and I was like, we're never going to say that on camera because Eric and I can't say digitization. So we've
I
gotten
still can.
to, I know, so we've gotten to the point where we can now say interoperability because it is such a trend in the industry and something that is definitely here to stay when it comes to the maximization of value with ever you're in an ERP system or a best of breed, whatever that looks like. But I know we're at the end of our time today, but I have one more question for you, Eric. Is what's next for your YouTube channel or for your overall influencer content?
Yeah. So, of course, I want to keep growing the channel and listening to the market and providing content that's valuable and reaches a larger audience. So constantly looking for ways to do that. So the organic growth that we've had with the YouTube channel, we want to continue down that path and maybe accelerate it as time goes on. Um, but some other things we have coming up there outside the realm of the YouTube channel, but complementary to it is one is I have a book that's being published at some point this year. We're trying to finalize that, and given the busy nature of our growth in business, that hasn't happened as fast as I'd like. But the book is complete, and we're just waiting to get it out to the market. So that's one thing is my first book. The other is an in-person event, our first in-person event since COVID, Digital Stratosphere, which we did several of them before COVID, and they were highly successful. A lot of really good content, really good speakers, not just myself, but a dozen or so other speakers and thought leaders in the industry. So that's coming up in the fall. So those are two things that we have that are sort of ways that we want to reach the audience and interact with the community here.
Excellent. Well, thank you for all of your hard work on this great content. And thank you to the audience because really we do get a ton of ideas from you. And I know Eric cares very much about your engagement and your overall feedback on the content. If you have not already, you should definitely, obviously, subscribe to his channel. We also have a Third Stage YouTube channel and a Third Stage TikTok as well. If you subscribe to Eric, you'll see him on there as well. We also have our two podcasts that Ground Control, our Transformation Ground Control podcast, is released on Wednesdays. And then also we have our shorter form podcast that was released every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, as well as our blog. So lots of content to engage with. And we very much appreciate your feedback. But congratulations again, Eric, and thank you so much for joining us for our Q&A today.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for all your help. Because people that don't know, you are our global marketing manager. So you are a large part of the reason why the channel has grown so much and why we have so much exposure in the community. So thank you for everything you and the marketing team do.
That is our pleasure to learn from our fearless leader here. So, with all those warm and fuzzies, we will see everyone next week on Tuesdays at our normal live stream. So, please jump on, ask some questions. Meanwhile, leave those comments for my question jar because it's now empty. So, I need your help there. But otherwise, we hope you have a great rest of your week and we will see you next time.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.